Good morning and welcome to the Alabama Works webinar series, a monthly webinar designed to provide information and speakers related to the workforce in Alabama. Past webinars are available at the Alabama Works website at alabamaworks.com. And now your host, Tim McCartney, Chair of the Alabama Workforce Council.
Good morning, everyone, and happy holidays. Welcome to the December 2020 Alabama Works monthly webinar. Today, we're going to discuss how Alabama is incorporating credentials of value into our short and long-term talent development strategy, which includes modularizing degrees so that people who earn short-term credentials are able to get credit towards earning a 2 or a 4-year degree. So we're pleased today to have Dr. Robin McGill, who is Director of Instruction for Special Projects for the Alabama Commission on Higher Education. Dr. McGill will give us an update on our Alabama Credential Registry, which we will be using to make all of our post-secondary credentials and degrees transparent. Dr. McGill is also going to give us a preview of the regional profiles that were developed through an Equity Leadership Acceleration Grant generously awarded to Alabama by the Lumina Foundation. These profiles will help us hone in on our regional and local targets for equitably reaching our post-secondary education attainment goal. After Dr. McGill, we'll be joined by Mr. Scott Cheney, who is the Executive Director of Credential Engine. Scott's going to give us an overview of the work that Credential Engine has embarked upon in partnership with Alabama and many other states and organizations in order to make the plethora of credentials transparent for students, job seekers, and employers. After Scott, we'll have Dr. Amber Garrison Duncan, who is the Strategy Director for Student Success at the Lumina Foundation. Dr. Garrison Duncan is a true friend and partner at Alabama. She will share information about the Lumina Beta Credentials Framework, which was used as the basis for the Alabama Occupational Ontology. After Dr. Garrison Duncan, we'll have Ms. Marion Michelle, who is the Executive Director of Breakthrough Birmingham. She's going to share with us updates on the important work that she and her organization are doing in the Birmingham area to expand education, access, and success. So let's get rolling as I turn the floor over to Dr. McGill. Dr. McGill, are you ready?
I am.
Welcome.
All right. There we go. Good morning, everyone. If you don't mind, I'm going to share my screen. I definitely appreciate this opportunity to speak to everyone about the work that we've been doing here at the Alabama Commission on Higher Education with our partners that are represented on this call. Always want to thank Chairman McCartney and Nick Moore in the governor's office for leading this valuable work. And we've been having great conversations with Amber and her colleagues at Lumina Foundation. So I'm glad she's going to be able to talk about those today as well. All right, let me go ahead and get the sharing going. Okay, so I know it was promised that I would talk about a couple of different initiatives here. So let me go ahead and start with the regional profiles, and then I'll kind of link those up with where we're going on the credential registry. All right. So Alabama's regional workforce profiles. This work was sponsored through a grant from the Lumina Foundation for Equity Leadership Acceleration Grant. And the idea here was that a small grant, in this case was only $50,000, would support a kind of kickoff of some work that could grow into something much bigger and more comprehensive for the state. All right. So these regional workforce profiles that AIC kind of conceived of with our partners throughout the workforce spectrum here in Alabama are intended to represent differences among the 7 workforce regions. We hired a partner, Equivolve Consulting. They're based out of Baltimore, And they did some deep data work, largely with our US Census data, and helped us produce 2-page profiles. And I'm going to quickly do a overview of what we see for Region 1. So each region has one of these 2-page profiles, and we've got the final versions, but we're going to do a launch of these sometime later this week. We'll keep everyone posted about where they're linked to, but you're welcome to email me if you want to see your own. And I know this is tiny writing, so I'm going to go through each of the sections really quickly. So Region 1, this is our real data for your workforce. You've got just a sense of who is in your working age population that you might want to create programs and policies for. So obviously there are people in the working age profile that are over 54, but in terms of where state investment is going, we're probably aiming at the younger folks. So that's why we did these ages 16 to 54. Region 1, obviously that's up near Huntsville. They've got a pretty sizable working age population, a slight decline over the past 5 years. And then when you look at your region versus state, that's the red bars are the region versus the black bars, or the gray bars represent where the state is at. And this region is pretty on par, but they are kind of overrepresented in this older share of the workforce, 45 to 54. And they're a little bit less in poverty. We can see the overall race ethnicity distribution. This region is more overrepresented for the white population and underrepresented for the black population. When we look at the education snapshot, this is where we hoped that this could be of value really for that credential registry. So when you look over here at the right, you're seeing where all of the post-secondary providers are in Region 1, the ones that are already connected in with the workforce system. We've got public universities, WIOA eligible providers, those are your Title I folks, community colleges and apprenticeships, private nonprofits. These are your private institutions and no private for-profits here. But what you see is that there are some sections of this region that are what might be called education deserts, where there aren't really key providers there. And there may be satellite sites or smaller entities, but these might be real opportunities to get credentials up and going to serve these populations, and then connect those in with our credential registry, which is intended to be a directory of all of those providers in the state and all of the credentials that they provide. The other thing you might notice from this section related to the credential registry has to do with the highest level of education, or what you might call education attainment. And up here in the top, these are people who already have degrees and credentials. Down here in the blue, these are people who have some college, no degree, but they aren't enrolled. They have a high school equivalency only, or they have less than high school. And those are really the populations that can be best served by post-secondary degrees and credentials of value. So trying to figure out how to engage that population and get them back into, or get them upskilled, I guess, to reach our $500,000 or 500 credentialed Alabamians goal is really important. And then perhaps the greatest opportunity, I'll call it, would be these opportunity youth down here. 14,000 youth in Region 1 are totally disengaged from the labor market and the education system. They're not in school and they're not employed. Now that's, when you look at the whole percentage, I think it's around 10 or 15%, but that's still a large number of our young people that we could try and reconnect into the education and workforce system. We also did a quick snapshot of the workforce in terms of employment. And we've heard a lot about employment and unemployment, but we split folks into employed and not employed, being unemployed and not in the labor force. This region is pretty consistent across different race ethnicities. And this also is consistently high. These figures for employment sort of top out around 75, 80%, because there are always going to be that percentage of folks who aren't able to work or choose not to work. On the wage side, we split those people who are working 30 hours or more, so kind of a full-time set of folks, and who's making 35,000 and above and below, with the idea that this is related to that self-sufficiency that we've heard about on other webinars. And you can see that there are differences across race ethnicities. White and Black are actually pretty close in this region. Over here on the right, you see the COVID claims, and we were sort of surprised by this. I mean, maybe we shouldn't be surprised since we all have been affected in some ways, but we went to our Alabama Department of Labor data and captured the number of claims, individual unique claims filed between COVID back in March and the end of September. And when you look at that number, 160,000, compared to the overall labor force that we talked about, this is 37%. So out of every 3 people, at least one of them has filed some kind of unemployment claim up in Region 1. Employment access, we tried to capture some of those factors that affect people's ability to work, either transportation, healthcare, and whether they can get to the internet, and obviously how affected people are by COVID in terms of its mortality. And this region actually is performing pretty well. So 86% broadband, lower than the state average for COVID. And at the end, we did a little bit of synthesis of the key findings and some data sources, and I won't read these for you, but the idea here is that these are jumping off points for people to start conversations and initiate some potentially asset mapping, strategic planning. And then obviously one of the big things we're doing here with the Alabama Commission on Higher Education is reaching out to our 2-year and 4-year partners, trying to integrate with our Office of Apprenticeship, strengthen partnerships with our regional workforce councils, and ideally, being able to pull in some additional investments and funding to help us continue to broaden and deepen this work. And as I mentioned, this is very related to the overall project around credential registry, which I think I presented on at the last of these webinars. So I won't go into detail there, but I am really pleased to say that we've just registered our first test batch of credentials through the Credential Finder. I see Scott Cheney is nodding his head there. Those went in on Friday. I think we uploaded about 15 or 20 of them, which is, we've got at least 1,600 that are kind of waiting in the wings, but we wanted to get that test batch up into the system to make sure it works. So there is no longer a screen that says Alabama, no credentials found. It is credentials found in Alabama. And there certainly will be more going forward. So I'll stop there. I'm happy to take questions or hand it off to the next speaker.
So I think I am up next. Thank you, Robin, for that overview, and thank you, Chairman McCartney and Nick, for the invitation to join you today. So my name is Scott Cheney. I am the CEO here at Credential Engine, and I am going to start my screen share and just give you a few quick insights into the work that we're doing here at Credential Engine. And for the purposes of the conversation today, it really is going to flow directly from Robin's discussion about the credential registry, because what we do is provide the technology and the data structures and the finder tools behind that credential registry that we're working with Alabama to help build out. So just very quickly, give you an overview of who we are and what we do. We're a public good nonprofit. We're based in Washington, D.C., but we're a distributed organization. We came into existence about 3.5 years ago with the support of the Lumina Foundation, JP Morgan Chase, the Business Roundtable, and now many, many others. And we are we support an open source data structure that ensures that we're able to have common ability to describe, search for, compare, analyze all the information about credentials in the United States, and then, in fact, eventually around the world. And we do that because it is a really, really messy marketplace in the credentialing space. An upcoming report we're going to have in early next year is going to increase the number of credentials that are available in the United States to just shy of 1 million. And that means that if you're in Alabama and you've got those 1,600 credentials that Robin mentioned are going to be uploaded, and probably more coming after that, and you've got countless national certifications and badges and other credentials that are offered by multiple organizations around the country, you're trying to help individuals in Alabama be able to make more sense of which credentials are appropriate for them, which ones have good quality outcomes, which ones are in a pathway toward the job that you're aiming for, how do they connect to each other, what do they cost. All of that information might be easily found in one system for degrees, in a different system for apprenticeships, and a different system for licenses. And as Robin said, what's happening in Alabama and other states is that all of that data about all these different credentials is being brought into this standard data format, not changing what's being said about them, but just letting all that information be able to be compared and used in modern tools that allow people to be able to sort through and navigate all that information much more easily. So not just learners being able to see all that information, but employers being able to understand all of the credentials that an individual brings to them, how they connect to each other, what all the competencies and skills are that a person has, and be able to link that more seamlessly to the actual skill demands of that job. So we are increasingly the source of that standard. And again, Lumina established us because nothing like that existed. And they wanted to make sure that they were able to have that kind of a resource in the marketplace to assist with their goal of understanding how many people had a high quality credential. You can see from this map that we are working very heavily with a number of states. We're actually, I can update this slide. We have added the 5 Midwest states that are listed here at the bottom: Iowa, Missouri, Nebraska, North Dakota, and Wisconsin, through some work we're going to be doing with the Midwest Higher Education Compact that we just got a grant for last week. Connecticut is also going to be joining us next year, and then a handful of others. So we're at about half the states right now who are working with us. And I will say that of all of the states, Alabama is taking probably the most comprehensive, the most thoughtful approach to this work that we've seen anywhere. And I was just on a phone call with Texas last week, and that fact really got them upset. So they felt like if we're behind, we need to get in the game, because Alabama is beating us bad out there. So you can take that to the bank with you for the time being. So with all these different partners, what we're really about is building a linked open data network that everybody can access for timely and trusted information about credentials, competencies, skills, jobs, pathways, and all these other factors, including quality indicators. So one of the things that we're doing with Alabama, but with some other states, is working with a number of quality assurance organizations, including places like National Skills Coalition, Education Strategy Group, Education Quality Standards Outcomes Board, in order to be able to have indicators of quality, the data about quality of credentials, also be publishable through our schema, so that those can be seen in the registry. So if you're looking at a credential in the registry, you'll be able to see who's offering it, what the credential is, who's made determinations about its quality, which could be an accreditor. It could be a state through their eligible training provider list. It could be any number of other entities that play a role in that quality assurance. And that information will be displayed and signaled to people who are using this information as well. So just very quickly, because I know you want to be able to hear from the other presenters today, and I don't want to take up too much time. how we do this work so that you have a sense of what the pieces of this puzzle look like. So we host here at Credential Engine a number of technologies, all open source. Everything we do is open source and Creative Commons licensed. But the main thing that we do is this credential transparency description language that Robin was referring to, which is that common language to help describe all credentials that are out there. We work with a lot of community groups. We work with educators, employers, internationally in order to make sure that language is always evolving, always growing. As organizations or states come to us and say that they want to be able to describe another aspect of a credential that's not in the registry or not in the language now, we work with them to add terms and to make sure that everything is working together. We host a series of publishing tools to make sure that the data can be published. So those first 15 or 20 that came in from Alabama came in through these publishing tools. They can now be seen in the registry and in the credential finder so that you can actually understand what's out there. We have API tools and other resources to help with that process. The registry itself, we host a national registry, and then we work with the states to, in various ways, build out unique individual registries or just commingle with the national registry. But either way, you'll always be able to pull down just the Alabama portion of that registry to understand what's in Alabama. Or you could mix Alabama with all of the national IT certifications or other things to have a richer picture about all IT credentials, both offered by Alabama institutions and others outside of Alabama. And then we have a credential finder, which is just a way to see in the registry. So think about that as like an Expedia for credentials, where you can actually go look and see what's in that registry. But ultimately, our goal is to work with other partners to build new tools that can put this data into the hands of users. So that could be a Parchment or an EMSI or Cruder or Naviance or Workday or Indeed, who would be taking this data and building it into their tools that are also serving end users. Just a couple more quick slides just to give you an idea of what we're doing here. So far, I've talked kind of generally about the credential transparency description language, but just to give you a little bit more of a picture, there are 500 terms in the schema. Then I can't list them all here, but just wanted to give you an idea of the kind of things that can be described using the schema, and that Alabama has been working with its providers to collect data on, and always going back, and we'll be trying to add more data all the time about all these credentials and all these providers. But you can see here that we have information that can be shared about the credential itself, the organization that offers that credential, costs, any assessments associated with that credential, learning opportunities, and we've recently added in this bottom right-hand corner the ability to describe the employment and earnings associated with credentials, whether there are any employer requirements or preferences, information about career pathways that those credentials are part of, transfer value, links between the education and training that leads to the credential, and job requirements. So by matching up and publishing all of the information from ONET or the NICE cybersecurity framework, so we can link credentials to those frameworks, and you can see the connections between all of those. And we're constantly adding more. And then just to give you an idea, I said that there's just shy of 1 million credentials out there. We are now, I think, just over 20,000 credentials that have been published to the registry. We think next year we'll be closer to 75 to 100,000 as more and more states are publishing, like Alabama. We don't just collect information about credentials. We also have what is now probably one of the largest registries of competency frameworks. So we have about 750 competency frameworks that are published in this language, representing just shy of 50,000 unique competencies. And then a number of assessments as well, like I said. So by having all of this information in the registry, you can link credentials to competencies, to assessments, to jobs. And then just very quickly, one of the last things we'll be doing, one of the next things we'll be doing with Alabama is not just publishing the individual credentials, but also publishing information about the pathways that are being developed in Alabama. So you'll be able to connect the credentials to those pathways in the state and understand how all of these play together in the marketplace. I'll leave it at that and happy to answer any questions, but turn it over to the next speaker.
All right, thank you, Scott. Really appreciate that information. And thanks for sharing how you and Credential Engine are working to register and make transparent all the hundreds of thousands of credentials in our talent ecosystem. Very important, and we're working hard to get our employers to start registering these credentials. And I believe I said you were the executive director. I want to correct that. You're the CEO of Credential Engine. So I want to make that fix the record there. So our next speaker will be Dr. Amber Garrison Duncan. She is from the Lumina Foundation. She is the director of the student. Well, Amber, I've lost my notes here, but anyway, she's director for student success for the Lumina Foundation. And Doctor, we appreciate you being here with us today. So the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Chairman McCarthy. It is, and Nick and Robin, it is such a pleasure for Lumina to have a partnership with Alabama, and really want to just champion your work and all the great things you're doing. As Scott mentioned, Alabama really is taking a very thoughtful approach to all of this work, and we're just thrilled to be a partner with you in that. I also have to say, as a Texan, that I know the competition is real, and I look forward to seeing how other states look up to you and follow your lead, because you really are serving as leaders in this space. I'm thrilled to be able to talk with you today. I'm going to share my screen here with about one piece of our work that is complementary to a lot of the other things that are happening, and then that is about the Beta Credential Framework. But before I start, I thought I would just ground for folks who weren't aware kind of what Lumina is. We are the largest private foundation focused solely on higher education in the US. We have set goal 2025 for the nation, that understanding by 2025, 60% of Americans will need a high quality post-secondary credential. And when we say credential, we mean degrees, certificates, certifications, that people will need something beyond high school to be able to have access to good jobs. And the other thing that we track is understanding how the country is in getting to that goal. We track national and state level data. And certainly the data you put together, Robin, and then that you all are providing to your regions is much more in the weeds on this, but I would love for you to see how the work that you're doing in your regions adds up to what our country is able to accomplish. So as you can see, since we've been working on this goal since 2008, we've made some good progress towards the goal, and our national average is 51.3%. But you can also see that that's still, we still have a ways to go, and 2025 will be here very, very quickly. And so we're really excited again to be partnering with you all to help move the needle on this. And just so you can see how the Alabama data tracks to the national average, is that, I will say there are a few states who are above the national average, but this just allows you to see again how the work that you are doing will contribute to Alabama stepping up and again moving the needle here in ways that we know are very important to you and very important to the nation. Lastly, just something about Lumina, that we lead with a commitment to racial equity, and that we believe that equity will be achieved when outcomes cannot be predicted by race or ethnicity, and that justice will be achieved when the root causes of inequities are eliminated. And so a lot of the work that we are supporting, and again, a lot of the work that you all are doing is about creating a more just system of education and work in the places where you live. And so again, very excited to be partnering with you on that. So in a complementary, back to the role of frameworks in this, part of what you heard from Scott Cheney is understanding how we get to a place where there's credential transparency, that we really need a transparent marketplace in order for learners and employers and our education providers to navigate, something that right now is not very transparent. And while Scott covered a lot of different components of what are in credentials, you also heard him talk about competencies. And so there's really this is an important piece of complementary work to making sure that the data that goes into the registry can be fully transparent, that the competencies are fully transparent. We also know that learning frameworks are useful to helping to shape curriculum. They're also used by employers to help compare different types of credentials and understand how they might be a best fit for different types of jobs. So again, this idea of learning frameworks is something that Lumina got into probably about 2008, the same time we set that goal, because we knew it was an important part of getting to the type of learning system we'd like to see. So again, just understanding that learning frameworks help make it easier to understand the competencies with any credential. We can create more equitable pathways when things are more transparent. We can have better comparability because we know what the value of various credentials are and which credentials best fit employer needs. And then again, portability. So if I want to take my learning with me from one place to the next, and these pathways that you all are building, those stackable pathways, you have to have competency data behind that credential in order to do that work. And so that's why we believe, in addition to all the things you're doing, that one key aspect of that work is leveraging the competency data. And so, as you know, the maps that have been built by your regions and the subject matter experts really are seeking to maximize, how do we take that competency data and make it transparent so that it can be used. And here's just a visual that I think is help to show all the different ways that competency data can be used by employers, but also by education providers, whether that in that learning and development, that's something that's provided by the employer, but also in that learning development cycle, you can see different types of education and training coming into this circle to help really make sure that employers get access to the workforce they need, that people are prepared to be in the workforce, and that that all of that centers around having, again, this competency information that's just really critical and important. So that's a little bit of the why we got involved, but what we saw was that, as Scott mentioned, there's lots of frameworks in the US. I think that the total that we've seen is that there's about 1,000. So every industry, every institution, lots of folks have built frameworks over the years, which is a very kind of US approach to this, right? We have a federated approach to things. Everybody likes to have their framework, their piece of it, but that also means we're speaking about 1,000 different competency languages, which is pretty impossible to try to make sense of. Again, when we talk about, one thing is making it transparent, but the big question then becomes, how do we know if we're speaking the same language? Or do we have some way to translate between all those different languages to get us to a place where we have a more common understanding about what people know and can do, or again, what the job requirements might be for a particular job or field. And so our modeled after other countries, many had developed what they called qualifications frameworks. And those were leveled frameworks that had competencies at each level, that also had certain domains that it covered what those competencies would be. So we gathered up a group of experts and created what is called the Beta Credentials Framework. And it's called Beta because it's not very old and it's still being tested and used. And we're really pleased, again, that Alabama is a leader in this. But what's different and unique about this framework is, again, I would hone in on these levels, that instead of those levels being determined by credential type, which is what a lot of other frameworks use, the Beta Credentials Framework those levels are really just meant to indicate deeper or broader knowledge. And so it really is something that can be a translator between, again, a lot of these different frameworks, that I can use it as a guidepost to understand the level that a credential might be at, or that a job posting might be at. And so it's really become something that's very useful as, a translation tool. The other piece that I would hone in on is that, we tried to keep it pretty simple. So 5 domains covers a lot of different competencies, but we didn't want you to have to work with, a framework that had 500 domains, or, even 10 would be unruly to have to try to manage. And so this, I think when you look at your ontology and the work that's been happening in Alabama, you can see this as the foundation for that work. Again, when you look at the levels and the different ways that competencies are described. And so again, we're really thrilled that Alabama has come on board and has been using this as, again, that underpinning translation tool to make sense of the competencies that are included. And then just to, again, connect the dots back up to the bigger picture, is that we know that this information, competency information, is critical to be connected up into Credential Engine, and then also to get into your continuum of credentials of value. That the competency information, the big piece here is that by using Credential Engine, you turn that competency data into something that can be managed. It can then be linked to other data, again, to improve the search and discovery process, as Scott mentioned. But we have to have that data pulled out in a common language and in a common published way so that we could do that kind of work. And then also it allows us to start to articulate how learning can move across different spaces. So we've seen lots of institutions use this to assist them with prior learning assessment, or broadly to more what we would say is more recognition of learning, where the learner is not reassessed for those skill sets. It's taken that that credential and those competencies, that those skills have already been assessed, and that learner can then get credit for what they already have, what they already know and can do immediately. And then the other piece of this is, in order to, again, determine quality in your credentials of value work, is that it's important, obviously, to have the credential data, but that the credential data really does need to have the competencies filled out in it as well, in order to understand if those competencies match up with the employer demand. And then we've already talked about the role of competencies and stackability. And so that's a quick overview of the framework, why we developed it, why it's been important, and why we think it's really a critical component of all the work that you're doing. And it's been great to have it underpinning that. So I would be happy to take questions.
I think we'll do those at the end if we have extra time, Dr. Garrison Duncan. But thank you so much for sharing your presentation with us today, and your steadfast support and Lumina's steadfast support for Alabama and our efforts to develop the Alabama Occupational Ontology. We look forward to sharing our progress with you over the year, and I really like the fact that we're ahead of Texas on some things. I've got a brother that lives out there, so he's always making comparisons. So we hope we keep up that lead. So now we're going to hear from Ms. Marion Michelle, who is the Executive Director of Breakthrough Birmingham. Ms. Michelle, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chairman McCartney, and thank you, Nick, for inviting me to this space. I'm not going to take up too much of your time. I think we've had some great speakers who've been able to talk about the bigger picture of what's happening in Alabama. I'm actually going to bring you back not only a couple of years, but I'm also going to bring you to Birmingham specifically, which is where Breakthrough Birmingham operates out of. And we actually work with middle school and high school students. So the idea for us is to work with traditionally underrepresented students who are highly motivated, and partner them up with college students from all over the country to bring them here to Birmingham. And so the idea is, hopefully we get to post-secondary success, which is a lot of what you all are really focused on, which I love. I absolutely love where this can end up. I'm not going to go into too much detail about the educational outcomes in Alabama. We know that we're doing a lot of work here. And part of what it is that we're trying to figure out is within the causes of the issues that need to be taken account for. What we want to focus on is just learning loss that comes specifically through poverty, through low income environments, the exposure and opportunity gaps that a lot of our students go through, as well as the high quality teacher shortage in the state of Alabama. So the way that we tend to address that is by providing free academic support to students, by providing holistic support. So Dr. Garrison Duncan focused on the framework that's, spoke about the social component, the personal component, the cognitive component. So we focus on a lot of those social, emotional, and sort of networking skills that we know that it's not just enough for a student to know how to read or write or do science. There's actually so much more for them to be able to do to be successful. And those are not the only determinants. So we really want to focus on building them up in that space. And then additionally, we focus on providing paid internships, paid fellowships for college students from all over the country, so that there is an incentive to come here. But also, I'm a big believer, I'm not from the state of Alabama. I'm a big believer that once you come here, it's really easy to stay here. And so it's just a matter of getting you here. And so we've been able to do that with a couple of our college students from all over the country. So Breakthrough is actually, the model that we use is one where we call it a students teaching students model. So you have those scholars that are coming in, what we call scholars, highly motivated. We're partnered with Birmingham City Schools. And so we're taking in not just your A and B students, which is what sometimes people think about as highly motivated, but a lot of students who fall through the crack that if just given a little bit of extra support, they could actually get to that next level. So we work with these particular students, and we partner them up with our teaching fellows who are undergraduate students from all over the country, who are looking to become educational advocates and leaders, whether that's in the classroom or outside the classroom. The idea is they're interested in this topic of education. And I'll go into it a little bit later, but actually a lot of our teaching fellows come out and actually go into the classroom, which is really phenomenal. So we take these high achieving college students, and they're actually coached by instructional coaches. So these are veteran educators from the local community, in this particular case from Birmingham, who are looking for professional development, but who are also looking to figure out how to bring these great, awesome ideas that these college kids bring into their own classrooms and into the schools themselves. So it's a students teaching students model, and then a teachers training teachers model. We just figure that there's a lot of local talent that we can actually just utilize to make this happen. And I think one of the things that I've been hearing from the speakers today is just the amount of people power that we have in Alabama is one that we haven't always necessarily pushed to maximize. And so what we're trying to do right now in a lot of ways is just in some small way, Breakthrough Birmingham is trying to figure out how to do that piece, because we know that there's a lot of homegrown talent here. So Breakthrough Birmingham is actually part of a national organization called Breakthrough Collaborative. Nationally speaking, our students are 6 times more likely to go to college and to complete college, which puts them on par with high income students from all over the country. And 76% of our teaching fellows actually go on into the education field. In Birmingham, since 2013, we've worked with over 430 students, over 140 teaching fellows, and 64% of our high school students have actually graduated and immediately entered college. So our first graduating class of 2019 entered college at a rate of 64%, which is about 10 points higher than Birmingham City Schools and about 2 points higher than the state of Alabama. So we figured if that's our first class, we're on a pretty good path. The asterisk here being obviously COVID is going to probably knock down a couple of things there, but we are very, very confident in the fact that if we continue to support students in the ways that they need to be supported, that it's not just about being able to go to college and doing really well in college. It's about having options no matter what it is you choose to do really well on that path. So if you choose to go into the military, if you choose to open up your own business, whatever it is that you choose to do, that you're going to be successful in that. And this particular summer where we ran an actual virtual summer, and I'll go through that in a little bit. What's happened since then is 2 of the 4 coaches that we had for this summer actually are now teachers of the year at their school. Of those 16 teaching fellows that we've had, 2 of them are actually directly going into the classroom next year, which is really exciting. And they're going into Birmingham City Schools. So what it is that we're envisioning to take place is taking place in the ways that we would love. As I mentioned before, free programming is what it is we offer. So we've got our flagship programs, which is our summer program, where we work with rising 7th, 8th, and 9th graders to work on academic acceleration and enrichment and exposure in general. And we also have our school year program. So that means that we're working with our 7th through 10th graders, and there's the weekly support. So we have homework help, we have test prep, we have enrichment and mentorship opportunities, but we also have monthly Super Saturdays where we take guests from within the community to come and actually speak to our kids, because as much as we love our kids, they love hearing other people come. They think it's ridiculously special for people to come in to speak to them specifically. So we've had, every one Saturday a month for the past 3 months, 8 different guests coming in to speak to our kids, which is pretty phenomenal. This last summer, we had 102 students that completed the program at an attendance rate of 94%, which is pretty awesome for middle school and high school. Of the 16 teaching fellows, like I said, 2 of them are going into Birmingham City School classes now. And we made 2 months of reading gains and had no losses in math, which is pretty phenomenal for a COVID summer specifically. What we've learned from this virtual summer is that we can actually expand into the school year. So we actually just finished our school year, the fall program this last Saturday. So we had about 79 students that actually completed the program with 8 teaching fellows. And we had an average of about 11 touch points, check-ins, et cetera, with students. So 867 actual individual checkpoints to make sure that, are you doing okay? What's the help that you need? How can I support? Because especially during these times, I think it's more than, it would be an understatement to say that there needs to be extra supports for students, particularly in those grade levels. And then finally, I think the thing that, and I'll speak to this in a little bit, the thing that works for us is just having guest participants. We've worked really hard to have our community be a part of the program, because we know that if our students see that the community is interested, they're more likely to figure out ways to be a part of their community. And so just really quickly, these are just some partners that we've been lucky to work with over the past year and a half. And I think, once again, the big piece here is this doesn't work without community partners being deeply entrenched into what it is that we do. So going forward, the piece that we're looking for consistently, and I'll take more questions on this, is just what robust programming looks like. And for what we imagine right now, that includes a lot of exposure opportunities. People within the business community and the schooling communities. I think one of the things that I think we really want to try to aim for this upcoming year is in Huntsville, working with NASA to bring that to our kids, because so many of our kids want to be engineers or they're so interested in space. Partnering with local colleges and universities. I think part of our teaching fellow, the piece of the teaching fellows, is we're not only bringing in people from outside of Alabama, we're also bringing in people from inside of Alabama into doing what it is that we do. So the goal is to always have a 50-50 breakdown, probably a little bit more this summer, depending on whether or not we go virtual. But the idea is we want to make sure that we're not only exposing our students, our middle and high school students, to outside of Alabama and within Alabama, but we are also exposing and having our teaching fellows partner with one another. And finally, the big dream is just to figure out how to scale and expand. So we know that what we have is not specific to Birmingham if we figure it out. So we are looking to figure out, what does it look like to work in the greater Birmingham area? What does it look like to have this in the rural communities? What does it look like to have this over the state of Alabama? Because especially with the virtual summer, what we found is that it's actually really, if you do this the right way, it is actually pretty simple to be effective with virtual learning. And so we want to really capitalize on that, because it is a much cheaper model that still brings the same outcomes for us. And when we have the time, if we have the time, you are more than welcome to ask questions and find out more about what Breakthrough Birmingham does. Thank you so much for your time, y'all.
Well, thank you so much, Ms. Michelle, for your informative talk. That's very interesting. I hope you continue to have good success, and hopefully there's ways that the Workforce Council can work with you, particularly getting some people to talk to those students. I think that's very, very important. And we certainly have a lot of people on the council from the Birmingham area. So hopefully they're listening, and hopefully they will reach out to you and offer to come speak to those students. I agree with you. That's very important for children to see people and talk to them about what they do for a living. So next, we're going to have a brief workforce and labor market update from Nick Moore. So Nick, take it away.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Chairman McCartney, and good morning, everybody. And I'm going to share with you just a little bit of information from that has come through since last month regarding our labor market. And so we're still looking at October 2020 data, and sort of due to the way that we have got our schedule set up for this webinar, if we were about a week later, we would always have the most current data on our monthly UI claims and monthly workforce participation rate and labor force rate and unemployment rate. But we will have that next week. But taking a look at where we are in October, our unemployment rate is 5.8%. And as we've mentioned several times, our labor force participation rate continues to vacillate quite a bit. And that it happens quite a bit when you've got uncertainty in the labor market. But we are still seeing a increase in our labor force participation rate compared to some of our other neighbors in the southeastern region, and certainly compared to ourselves a year ago and then over the pandemic response. So our intentional focus on ensuring that we're considering the nearly 870,000 Alabamians that have been displaced, either underemployed or unemployed since March, and seeing that as a third opportunity population in combination with our traditional students and high school students and post-secondary students, and then also our second group, which are those with a barrier to unemployment, or excuse me, a barrier to entering education or workforce that are in our WIOA plan. So now we've got a third group, 870,000 people who, quite frankly, it's pretty time-sensitive proposition that we face as well, because we want to make sure we're reaching them before they happen to become structurally unemployed, or if they're lucky to go back into the same job they lost, maybe it comes back, but not in the same form. But we have to think about the folks that were working a couple of jobs, and you've heard me now say this so much that it's becoming repetitive, but we've got to make sure that in this narrow window of time that we're getting folks on a glide path to reskill and upskill into in-demand jobs. So taking a look at sort of how our weekly claims have leveled off somewhat. When we see back in March and April, we had just huge spikes, and really since the late summer, we've kind of leveled off to about in between 5,000 and 8,000 claims a week. Something that's important that I wanted to note, though, and this is important from an equity imperative and also important in regard to ensuring that we're getting people trained and upskilled for the jobs that are going to be coming back online, and also for the jobs that lead to a family sustaining wage. So if we take a look and we look at from the beginning of the pandemic all the way through September 30th, we have seen about 16.7% of our low wage jobs have been lost. High wage 6.8, middle skill 6.3. Now, I showed a similar slide like this from data back from the summer, and we actually saw to where there'd been a gain in middle wage and high wage jobs. And there'll be more data that comes out this week on that, and it'll be interesting to see what the numbers are. But the fact is that there's been a huge gap between low wage and middle and high wage jobs in regard to the impact and the acuity of COVID-19. And so what we're seeing is that for folks that are in what we would consider to be low wage jobs, we want to make sure that we're either upskilling or retraining them for one of these more resilient opportunity occupations, particularly those in the middle wage spectrum. And if we want to take a look at something here that's interesting as well, let's look at the number of job postings. Total job postings have decreased by 23.2% compared to January 2020, looking at December 4th. But when we look at the education level, job postings that require at least moderate education have only decreased 8.2%. Minimal, which would be attached with a lot of those low wage jobs, has decreased by 27.8%. Now, if I showed you a couple more options, and I didn't want to make this graph look too busy, actually jobs that require a tremendous amount of education have been impacted about as much as the minimal jobs. So where there's a sweet spot for education and retraining in resilient sectors are jobs that require a moderate level of education. But something that I thought was, and I want to make a caveat, this data was gleaned from Dr. Chetty and his team with the Opportunity Insight Tracker, looking at data from a platform called Zern. And that's not something that's hugely used and real wide in the state of Alabama, but you could look at it from the number that we're using at the beginning and look at the effect that over time. And so what this is an online math platform, and in Alabama, based on this data set, total student progress in math coursework had decreased by 34.2%. Now, again, we need to take this with somewhat of a grain of salt, because this is just sort of a heuristic to look at something. This is not a widely used platform in the state of Alabama. But I think it does tell a story about the impact of virtual learning on our students, and particularly when we're talking about math and STEM fields that are going to prepare students to, not only enter into those moderate level jobs, but also into our high wage jobs. That's important that we're tracking the impact of that. Now, also, I want to preview for the first time, just as a teaser for what will come out of Wednesday's ACCCP meeting. This is the 2021 list of top 25 in-demand jobs. So we are also going to be releasing our regional and statewide list of in-demand jobs, but here's what the top 25 look like for this year. And I want to close by saying that it's important for us to recognize that we're not just focusing on non-degree credentials in and of themselves as part of our talent development strategy. We're focused on using all forms of post-secondary learning, including non-degree credentials, which for a long time had not had a transparent and trackable way of articulating towards a 2- and 4-year degree. We're combining that into our talent development strategy so that we are having a clear way for students that are earning non-degree credentials to get credit for their prior learning experiences, their lived experience, and then also for the experience in earning that non-degree credential, so that we're able to unbundle modularized degrees, make certifications credit bearing, and ensure that we are not creating a mutually exclusive proposition with credit and time bearing coursework and then competency-based coursework. In Alabama, what we're doing is working to make those systems integrate. And that's why all this we take it back to our 2-pronged career pathway model. If we are not integrating non-degree and degree and non-traditional, traditional degrees, certificates, post-secondary learning experiences, the prongs of our career pathway model won't work, and we certainly won't be able to have people move from opportunity occupations to the advanced skill jobs. So although we talk quite a bit about non-degree credentials, that is not the only piece of it. What we want to do is make sure that in Alabama that we are getting past some of the negative externalities that have been developed by the fact that we can't always count short-term degrees towards a financial aid, for example, and that there's not always credit articulation values for non-degree programs. So we're working past those hurdles to make sure that we're addressing the top bullet point here, that in 1965, 80% of jobs that were in demand only required a high school diploma. Now that's 35%. And for those that reach self-sufficiency. And another key metric is 95% of the jobs that were created since the last recession, that we call the Great Recession, require at least some post-secondary education. And we know that from the data we've gleaned from our recent survey of the underemployed and unemployed, that people do want a pathway to reskilling, upskilling out of the pandemic and back into the workforce through short-term non-degree programs that are asynchronous, that they don't go into debt for, but they also do want to have credit towards a longer-term certificate or degree. And that's part of our focus with the Workforce Stabilization Program through our Reimagining Workforce Prep grant, is to make sure that we do have a pathway for people to continue their post-secondary journey and not let things like basic skills deficiency or not having a high school diploma, for example, at the beginning of their career pathway create a long-term hurdle. And so just wanted to make that point there, that we, although we are talking a tremendous amount about non-degree credentials, that is the one of the centerpieces of our talent development strategic plan. That is not in isolation or in competition with our traditional institutions of higher education and our traditional forms of learning, including long-term 2- and 4-year degrees. In fact, our strategy is to make sure those are complementary and working together, particularly to help benefit those 3 opportunity populations I mentioned. So thanks so much, Chairman McCartney. I will pass it back to you, sir.
All right, thank you, Nick. Really enjoy your updates. It adds a different dimension to what I already think I know. But from the numbers stated in your update, it's clear we've got a lot of work to do. And I know we've got around 860,000 Alabamians who lost their jobs since March due to the pandemic. We need to get them back to work. And secondly, you point out that 34% loss of math skills, I believe, in the educational. That's why it's so important we get these kids and keep these kids in school. Virtual is great, but it's very hard to teach kids, particularly younger kids. So we would like to see the schools continuing to operate. We've got a lot of industry in this state that have successfully worked through this pandemic, and I think we have a lot to offer there with our educators. So we'd like to see that. We don't, particularly in the younger grades, we don't need these kids to lose their opportunity to learn math and reading at that early age. It's a little easier to get by when you're older, but the young ones are the ones, particularly in the impoverished areas of the state, low income areas, we don't need to saddle them with lack of education. We've got enough problems as it is. So we're all pro education and pro getting everyone back to school. So as we close today, I want to share a few thoughts to tie today's themes together. The Georgetown Center on Education and Workforce argues that the middle skills pathways that include a post-secondary education beyond high school, but less than a bachelor's degree, is overlooked. However, these opportunities must not be linked to they must be linked to a positive labor market income and increased earnings, and that's a moral imperative. Also, non-degree programs must articulate towards 2- and 4-year degrees. In all 16 states that have sizable African-American populations, African-Americans are overrepresented in non-degree certificate attainment. In Alabama, African-Americans comprise 27% of the population, but earn 38% of non-degree certificates. To equitably reach our post-secondary education attainment goal, we must ensure that each of those non-degree credentials attained are linked to an in-demand job, and also provide a pathway to long-term post-secondary education degrees if so desired. Career-specific education in shorter-term programs has strong short-term value because it prepares people for immediate employment. However, career-specific programs can be a risky investment because they convey knowledge and skills that are most useful in a specific occupation or industry. In contrast to career-specific credentials, general associate degrees and bachelor degrees confer marketable general skills regardless of the student's field of study or major. So ultimately, the most valuable education over the long term is the one that provides the most marketable combination of specific and general skills. The Alabama Skills-Based Hiring Initiative is the culmination of a 2-year effort conducted by the ACCCP to develop the Alabama Credential and Competency Taxonomies that together produce the Alabama Occupational Ontology. The Alabama Occupational Ontology provides the DNA of each occupation. Employers will be able to see and contribute to the state's encyclopedia of occupational skills and credentials of value that they denote the mastery of those skills. So, and I've lost my place here. In the second quarter of 2021, the AWC will provide training for employers on creating skills-based job descriptions using the Alabama Occupational Ontology. The training will include using the competency models and Alabama Credential Registry to create job descriptions that use the competency statement created by the ACCCP. To operationalize the Alabama Skills-Based Hiring Initiative, the GOAT, Nick Moore and his staff, and the AWC are launching the Alabama Network of Open Competencies. Here's another acronym, ANOC. The ANOC will be a feature of the asset developed through a grant awarded to Alabama by the National Skills Coalition as of last week. This will allow employers to select the competencies and competency statements aligned to the occupations, occupational competency models, career pathways, and credentials of value identified by the ACCCP that are aligned to the occupations that employers are trying to fill. That will tie in with the information the ACCCP is going to publish starting on Wednesday, and Nick mentioned earlier. During the COVID-19 pandemic, it's been determined that Americans aren't turning their backs on education. They're just reconsidering how to obtain it. Enrollment in short-term credential classes during the pandemic increased 70% to nearly 8 million people as compared to the same period of last year. That increase came as freshman college enrollment dropped by 16%. Alabama's approach to the workforce response to the COVID-19 pandemic provides an opportunity to scale competency-based education by ensuring that short-term and non-degree credentials are able to translate to credit towards an associate or a bachelor's degree. As you've all heard by now, the Alabama Workforce Investment Board was awarded a 3-year, $17.8 million Reimagine Workforce Preparation Grant from the U.S. Department of Education back in September in order to scale the Alabama Workforce Stabilization Program, the AWSP. The AWSP is the first of a kind, non-traditional, short-term educational program that is potentially significant for gathering data on the quality and efficacy of short-term competency-based education programs that articulate to traditional post-secondary programs. The AWSP will provide funding for short-term programs that are not currently eligible for federal Pell Grants and student loans under the Title IV of the Higher Education Act. The income premium for adults without a college degree who can earn a short-term certification or credential varies by occupation. Carnevale, Smith, and Stroll of Georgetown have identified that post-secondary programs of study more than quintupled from 1985 to 2010, from 410 to 2,260. Since 1950, the number of college students has increased tenfold, and the number of occupations recognized in government statistics has tripled to more than 800. Colleges are offering a blizzard of degrees, certificates, licenses, certifications, badges, and other micro-credentials, all of which purport to qualify the recipient to enter an occupation. However, who really knows what all those mean? The premium is as high as $25,000 to acquire some of those credential skills and badges. Yet there's almost no value for certificates in other occupations. So we've got to be careful. We want these to be lead to jobs that are in high demand and high wage paying jobs. The AWSP is focused on the occupational clusters that yield a significant wage premium for certificate holders and that have proven most resilient to COVID-19 in Alabama. And those clusters are, number one, advanced manufacturing. 2 is healthcare. 3 is information technology. 4 is transportation, distribution, and logistics. And 5 is construction. In fact, many of Alabama's industries have proven to be quite resilient. Career-specific education and shorter-term programs has strong short-term value because it prepares people for immediate employment. Thus, the AWSP focuses on connecting short-term programs for rapid entry or re-entry into the workforce, coupled with a focus on the ability to benefit program for AWSP participants to continue their post-secondary education and then articulate the AWSP credits toward a long-term certificate or associate degree or bachelor's degree. Programs such as the AWSP and the Alabama Skills-Based Hiring Initiative will permit us to make rapid progress on the 2 most pressing issues facing Alabama: the COVID-19 recovery and equitably reaching our post-secondary education attainment goal. So that's a lot to digest, but that's all I have for today. And I again want to appreciate and thank the speakers we had today. We really got a lot out of it. We got to study some of that information in greater detail. But thank you for all being partners with Alabama Workforce Council and also the GOAT. And until we meet again in January, which we'll start another program. I don't have the date in front of me. That's bad on my part, but it's January. We'll have it. It'll be posted on the AlabamaWorks website, so you can get a recording of this there and for the next one we have in January. But until then, I hope you all have a safe and happy holiday.